Hey everybody, before we start the podcast, I wanted to let you know about one of our sponsors at Don't Split the Podcast Network. I'm talking about Kobold Press. You know them. They are an amazing third-party game design company that makes a lot of stuff for 5th edition D&D, Pathfinder, 13th Age, The Tome of Beasts, Deep Magic, The Book of Lairs, Prepared 2. These are just some of the amazing products that Wolfgang Bauer, the Kobold-in-Chief, has helped bring to us. And now their Patreon, Warlock, is coming out with some amazing new Warlock Lairs that are short 5th edition adventures. I am so excited for this as a backer of the Warlock Patreon. The first one is The Clattering Keep by John Sawatsky, who wrote all of the amazing Prepared materials and Prepared 2 materials. It's a book of mini adventures, and this is going to be an awesome mini adventure as well. Future installments are going to be by the one and only James Hake and a lot of other awesome designers on the Kobold roster. The lairs are built on Dyson Lairs maps and feature new magic items and new monsters. Kobold Press's next Patreon goal is to add a second lair to the Warlock rewards each month. Help expand the world of 5th edition dark fantasy at patreon.com/koboldpress. That's patreon.com/koboldpress. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. This week on the show, I am talking with two amazing game designers. First, it is an interview with DM's Guild Adept Rich Lescouflair about his work on the DM's Guild and his work with Esper Genesis, which is science fiction role-playing for 5th edition D&D rules. It is an incredible thing, and you can check it out for free. Then, I've got an interview with the one and only Doug Cole. Doug created Dungeon Grappling, a book that changes the game when it comes to grappling, makes it easier, more interesting, and more fun. And he's putting out a new adventure that we are going to talk all about in that interview. I can't wait for you to hear these, so let's stop waiting. Here is my interview with Rich. All right, everybody, now I am here with Rich Lescouflair. Rich, welcome to Tabletop Babble. Who are you, and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games? Tell the people out there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rich Lescouflair. Yes, he pronounced it correctly.
We practiced before this, yes.
Yes, we did. I was trying to give you credit there. I am a freelance writer and occasional cartographer and graphic designer. I am currently the lead designer for the sci-fi role-playing game for 5th edition called Esper Genesis. It is produced by our company Alligator Alley Entertainment, which I am one of a trio of. I am also a writer for D&D Adventurers League, and I have recently attained the esteemed privilege to be one of the WotC Guild Adepts, along with Mr. James here.
Yes, yeah, we're going to get into that because that is some awesome stuff. Rich, I wanted to talk with you today because you do so many things in the industry. But first, take me back. When did you first lay hands on a tabletop role-playing game? And describe to me the experience. Were you a player? Were you a dungeon master? What did it look like?
That's a story. So, this started out in junior high school. I was on the lunch line behind some kid that kind of, I didn't really know very well. And some other kid that was behind me reached over my shoulder and flicked him in the ear. And this kid turned around, thought it was me, and punched me straight in the face.
Wow. How does this lead to D&D?
So we started scuffling. We both ended up sitting in the gym, as punishment for fighting. And I looked down, and he's holding the D&D basic rules. And I just, he's just giving me like weird, angry looks. And I just kind of looked over. I was like, hey, man, what's that? And he just took a look at me, and then the expression changed. His eyes gleamed. He sat down next to me, and then the next 30 years was it.
Wow. That's awesome. Do you still play with this person?
No. It was my friend Daryl. He had moved away to New Hampshire a while ago, but I still see him on Facebook every now and again.
That's incredible. So, you're still friendly with this guy. D&D was the great equalizer. It brokered a treaty in your relationship. So, and then did you start playing with him? Is that sort of how
he was my first dungeon master.
That's awesome.
So yeah, he ran a game for us for a little while, and then I got so into it, he just left the books at my house, and I read them cover to cover, and then I was like, I want to run a game, and that's kind of the way it went. And ever since then, every single time a D&D product came out, I needed money to buy it, or
yeah, definitely. So how do you make the leap then? You're playing, you're playing with lots of people. You start running your own games. When do you make the leap to doing design and cartography and graphic design and layout and that sort of thing? When does that come along?
That actually comes along when I started putting together my own adventures, and I've always been a techie on the side. I've been very big into computers. I did web design since the late 90s. I built my own website, so I used to mess around with graphics a lot and Flash a lot, and so I always had updated graphics programs, graphics software, and I always wrote. I loved writing stories, and I loved writing adventures for my friends. So eventually, one and one adds together. I started writing adventures. Just as a hobby on the side, and I'm like, wow, I wonder if I can make this look like a D&D book, and that's kind of how it worked. I started practicing on Word, which everyone gave me weird looks about, and
perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable in my book.
Perfectly acceptable. Yeah, everything was Word and Photoshop, but you know what? Hey, I made it work, and eventually I ran into my friend Brian, who is now my partner. And he took a look at some of the stuff that I was working on, and he's like, you know what, you could probably get work doing this. Yeah, so he sat me down, he showed me InDesign and Photoshop tricks and things like that, and I started working on putting maps together, and that's how it was for the past 2 years. I started meeting a lot of really awesome people. I love this industry. This industry has a great bunch of people. They're all friendly and they all want to help. It's a fantastic place to be and to work and to talk to people.
So what was your first kind of gig then? Paid gig from somebody else?
My first actual paid gig was doing maps for a gentleman named Lewis Porter Jr. He does a lot of Pathfinder work. He does Neo Exodus. And he was asking me for, he just took a look at one of the maps that I was making for my DM's Guild adventure, and he said, okay, does somebody pay you for this? And I said no. He said, I'm going to pay you for this. You're going to draw me 6 maps. I said, okay. And then I shrugged. I said, okay, I did that. And then, I was still writing adventures. Brian and Eric, who are my partners now, while I was doing the map for Lou, I started doing an adventure for the two of them. And while I was doing the adventure, I also sat down with them and I did, art direction and helped out with the layout. And the two of them looked at me and said, you know what, instead of paying you as a writer, why don't we just kind of start a company?
Wow.
Yeah. So we decided to jump right into it. Well, because, I did writing and kind of a little bit of everything in between. Brian is an excellent graphic designer, and he does, superb layout work. And Eric used to work for Paradigm Concepts, which does designed Arcanist and Witch Hunter. So the three of us kind of had 3 parts of what would make a role-playing game company. So we put our heads together and started to work.
So what era is this, and sort of what games were you designing for? Was this D&D, and if so, what edition are we talking?
Oh, I mean, when I actually started getting paid to design, it was 5th edition.
Nice.
For sure.
Me too.
for sure. I went to Gamma Trade Show, and I was really silly because I did a whole mock-up of a 5th edition game module in Word, which with all the graphics and everything, which you worked in Word. It's a pain. It's really a big pain, and
it really is.
A long time to make it look exactly like a D&D book, and I got so excited about it that when I went to a D&D panel, Mike Mills was running it. And I got up at the end and I was like, hey, you want to take a look at what I did? I have no shame, I don't.
I mean, that's what conventions are all about. Did he take a look?
Yeah, he took a look. He was like, yeah, I love Greyhawk. It's actually my favorite setting. Don't tell anybody else that. Actually, I guess everybody knows now. So,
I won't tell a soul. So you will tell several people.
I will tell several people that Greyhawk is my favorite setting. With Dark Sun coming at a close second.
Exactly. Hey, I mean, those are great settings, and I believe Greyhawk is also Mike Merles' favorite setting. So,
yeah, that's kind of what started the conversation. They even said it in another panel. If you want to get into that type of thing, you want to get into doing work, you like writing adventures and stuff, just talk to them. They are extremely friendly. Chris Lindsay's been awesome with us so far. He's a blast to work with.
He definitely is. So the whole team, I think sometimes we hear people crap on Wizards because they're the biggest name in town when it comes to role-playing games and stuff, about them doing X, Y, or Z because of money, or it's a shameless grab for this or that kind of thing. And in my experience, everyone at Wizards of the Coast is awesome. And in my experience, everyone pretty much in the role-playing game industry is awesome if they make their career doing it.
I completely agree. I could not agree more.
A great community, great group of people, and the Wizards employees are at the forefront of that, and they set the tone for that in my mind, and they're doing an awesome job. Let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff you have on the DMs Guild. So, because you've got all kinds of stuff. You've got certainly your Adventurers League adventures you've mentioned. You've got map packs that are up there. But then you've also got several things that you've put up on your own. The Iron Bastion, the Sundered Realms Player's Guide. So where do you get your ideas for your solo projects? Like, what inspires that? Is it just something you want to create and you wish was there in your game? Is it something that you think this will do pretty well? Like, what's your thought process?
I wish I just kind of sat there and thought about stuff and it just popped in my head, but it really doesn't work that way. It's it's more along the lines of, hey, what's my favorite thing? Hey, what's my other favorite thing? What's my third favorite thing? Can I take 4 or 5 of them and actually put them together into something fun? That's kind of the way that my brain works when I'm putting stories and adventures together. The Iron Bastion, for example, is and it's connected to the Sundered Realms. What that is that's actually the western continent on Abir Toril, the one with Mastika on it. And that whole northern section is empty. It probably got mentioned in one book somewhere. Right. And I was looking on DM's Guild, everyone was writing for this adventure, that adventure, and I just kind of looked at it. I have my old Forgotten Realms Atlas, and I emailed Matt McElroy. I said, "Hey, is anybody doing anything with this? And are we allowed?" And he said, "All of Forgotten Realms is allowed." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll just take that continent and I'll build it." And so Sundered Realms kind of was born off of an old campaign world that I had with my friends when I was a kid. And I kind of combined it with a game that I was running recently. I took a couple of the stories together and mashed it up, and it became this thing. The Iron Bastion is the first adventure for it. Mm-hmm. From the point in time where I finished writing it, I have not been able to touch it again because Adventurers League plus Esper Genesis plus this has pretty much put a stopgap on the Sundered Realms at the moment. But the cool part is that afterward, after I get some free time, I would certainly love it if you and some of the guys would want to collaborate on this brand new, completely empty, well, not completely empty, but setting.
Sure, that sounds awesome, and what a great place to play. Because it sounds like people aren't there's not too much there you can mess up. So you get to do a lot of what you want, which is awesome, but there's enough there to kind of inspire ideas right. and that sort of thing. That was really smart.
It has a backstory. It has It kind of has a story, kind of a base template of a setting that you could put together, and it's sort of like a mix of like Vikings and Aborigine, sort of thing.
That's really cool. And I think we don't see as many things that are, that sort of flavor. A lot of what we see is the medieval European flavor, right? So it's fun to be able to see things outside of that as well. And, shout out to Matt McElroy. He's sort of the one bookshelf employee whose charge is the DM's Guild, and he does a great job, I think, answering lots of questions and being an active part of the community in addition to running the Dungeon Masters Guild. So shout out to him.
Yeah, definitely. I got to give it to Matt. I'm pretty sure when that thing started, he must have been inundated with questions he did not have answers to.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, he and Chris Lindsay working together have done like an awesome job just putting this thing together, which is amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the DM's Guild Adepts, right? So you've written this stuff for the DM's Guild, you've written some Adventurers League adventures, and then Chris Lindsay comes a-knocking. Right? I know how this part of the story goes, but our audience at home does not. Let's talk a little bit about the DM's Guild Adept program, and since I'm part of it too, I feel like we can have a back and forth here. What is the DM's Guild Adepts program? And then we'll talk more about products and stuff that are in it.
Well, as you know, it seems like we're the first in this case.
We are the first.
This is actually like an ongoing thing. Whenever they're coming out with a new season, there's been a lot of stuff on DM's Guild, like a lot of stuff.
A ton. There's thousands upon thousands of titles. Yeah.
And I think what Chris, wanted DM's Guild to be was, something like an extension of the stories that they're putting out. D&D is all about stories, it's all about storytelling, it's all about, adventure and having fun, and fans coming out with their own things connected to what's going on with Adventurers League and the hardcovers. Those are the things that sell in addition to the classes and all that. But DM's Guild, Chris wanted to take a select group of people and have them, specifically use all of their talents to put out some quality DM's Guild material that people can access and download as soon as the season starts. So it's, I think what he called it, in the vein of like video games, like a day one DLC, like, where you buy the hardcover book, you go online, and there's all this stuff available to you already that you can pick up and run along with your adventure. And
totally.
It's all by you and I and the rest of the team. We kind of have a grasp on putting these things together.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should, I always like to preface this because I know within the video game community, Day One DLC has gotten a bad sort of connotation around it because it usually means the game itself is not complete. But I do think it's a good metaphor in this case because all this means is extra content you can get for your Tomb of Annihilation adventure available the same day the adventure launches. And we both have access to Tomb of Annihilation, right? So because we got it for this project, we can say that adventure is very complete. There's a lot of really great stuff in there.
There is, and it does exactly everything. It's a complete adventure. It takes you into a whole new world of things that you've never seen or experienced before. Especially if you've been playing 5th edition from the start. Everything is different. The situations are different. The feel of the whole thing is absolutely different. And let's not get started on the death curse.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things I think is fascinating about it is if this had been the adventure they launched with, I think people would have been like, "What? No, we can't do this." But it's coming at the exact right time. A few years in, it's D&D on hard mode. Basically, it's got a great theme. It sort of answers. I always struggle in D&D with this question of like, if bringing people back from the dead is so easy, why isn't everybody doing it? And this sort of answers that question of like, well, a lot of people were doing it.
Too many times.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it brings back some classic D&D villains. There's some awesome jungle stuff. There's dinosaurs. So it's a great adventure, and it's fun to be able to then create stuff around that. And with the community of collaborators we've created, there are some brilliant minds in here. Everybody from Sean Merwin to Satine Phoenix, Rudy Rutenberg, Will Doyle, who helped co-authored the Tomb of Annihilation adventure with Chris Perkins, and Steve Winter is one of the adepts. Lisa Chen is in there, Cindy Moore, Claire Hoffman of the Adventurers League, Monica Valentinelli. We've got a ton of awesome people. Did I forget anybody?
Yep, you got everybody.
But yeah, so a great group of people who, all have proven design and storytelling chops for sure. So let's talk a little bit about what you are putting out there. You had this adventure. It sounds like you really enjoyed the adventure. What are some of the things that you are putting out?
Well, I am putting out an adventure. It's actually one of three. The first one is called Heart of the Wild, and it is following the continuation of art. Well, I mean. So yeah, I'm not sure how much I can say.
So here's what we'll say. This podcast is going to drop after tomorrow when the book releases. So what I will say is a little bit of spoilers are going to be inevitable from this point. We'll try to be somewhat spoiler free, but we can't talk about these products without giving some stuff away. So you have been warned. I would say skip ahead about 10 minutes. 5 minutes or so, and then hear Rich and I talk about Esper Genesis. So when you hear us throwing around the word Esper Genesis, you'll know you fast forwarded and are safe. So go ahead, Rich. Dig in. Spoilers be danged.
Spoilers. Let's do it. Actually, that's another wonderful thing about the Tomb of Annihilation hardcover is that it is chock full of setting stuff. It's a great story. It's a great adventure. It's complete. And it still leaves room for so much more. One of which is the city of Mesro. I remember the first Chult product back in 1993. Actually, I think I still have it on my shelf, actually. And it's all centered around the city. That in the hardcover, actually after the spell plague hit, it vanished, and now it's in ruins. In the midst of the jungle. There's a particular character that's in the adventure that believes that the city itself is really in another plane of existence or another dimension or another demiplane. It could be a number of things, and his wife is there, and he's looking to reunite with his wife. So that even though he's prominent throughout the adventure, his story doesn't really get resolved. So I decided that I would write a trilogy of adventures to kind of cement, his story. It never really followed into him searching for Mesro, what happened to Mesro, and what happened to the people there. So that is what the first adventure is, an introductory to his quest to find this lost mystical city and reunite with his wife. The players are going to play a very focused, prominent role in that. As I intend as the trilogy of adventures progresses, that the characters actually get a little more personally involved in the story.
That's awesome, and it's awesome because it ties into Will Doyle's supplement. Will Doyle has put out a big supplement that is the city of Mesro, and it's like a gazetteer, basically.
Mm-hmm. It is a. It's actually the ruins of Mesro. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, yes. No, thank you. Yes, it's called The Ruins of Mesro. We'll link everything we talk about, by the way, over in the show notes at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com for people who are interested in these supplements. That is just an incredible, incredible thing to be doing, that he has put out there. And so it's awesome then to have this adventure that is going to sort of tie directly into his gazetteer and give us a good reason to use it and everything. So
he made a beautiful map for that. That is wonderful.
Yeah. So that's awesome. I love that you're doing that. It's going to be a trio of adventures. Is this something that people can play during and also after, if they want sort of extra chult content when they're playing in Tomb of Annihilation?
The first one is supposed to be... You're supposed to be able to play it either during or after, or directly after.
That's awesome.
It's a tier 2 adventure, so you can play it during Tomb of Annihilation. So I figured that we could put something out, just like Will. Will's book is the same way, where he put it out so that setting around the ruins, you can use it either during the hardcover, to do some side quests, or afterwards to do some higher level adventures. The second and third adventure that I'm coming out with for my trilogy are going to be tier 3 adventures. So those are going to be definitely after the hardcover. I know that a lot of times when people buy the hardcover books, they're amazing, but people are looking for more content in that storyline for their higher level characters. So I figured I would write 2 adventures for that.
That's the kind of thing I like. I like when there's continuation and more stuff for me to play in an adventure once it's been done. And this sounds like a very worthy story to pursue, too, after the Tomb of Annihilation storyline.
Plus, we also have our collaboration. We have our Encounters in Port Nyanzaru.
Yes, yeah, which is a big. So that was a big collaboration that Rich did most of the work for. So 9 of the 10 DMs Guild authors contributed to that. They're a series of short encounters that you can drop into Port Nyanzaru, and it's got everything from yellow musk zombies, which you're just going to have to read the adventure to find out, to pirates, to secret shipments coming in that are more than what they seem. Sean Merwin wrote a really fun adventure that involves insect repellent. So, yeah, people are definitely going to want to check it out. Dinosaurs galore. Claire Hoffman has a really, really fun thing with dinosaurs happening. So, yeah, definitely check that out. Rich, in addition to writing a great encounter for that, you also did the layout and drew a beautiful map for it as well.
Oh, that's right. The bathhouse map.
Yes,
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. Written by the way, probably one of the most fun encounters in there. Liza Chen did an awesome job with that encounter.
That is a fun little encounter that's there.
Yeah, really is great.
The nice things about all the encounters in the book is that they're all different. They're all they all have kind of their own style, so they can all be, hey, I like this one, I'll fit it in here. There's something for everybody in that little book.
Yeah, it really is. Satine wrote this amazing non-combat encounter that is just super duper fun. Like that's each one is so creative and interesting, and I think people are going to have a blast dropping those in, and they're going to be really fun for those moments when your players want to run off and explore Port Nyanzaru. You'll have stuff ready to drop in, ready to go, which is great. So that was one of the things that I was like, I would love to see more encounter stuff in Port Nyanzaru, and so that was sort of the idea behind that supplement. So I edited stuff, but really you brought it all together and put it into this amazing package, which is awesome.
Well, thanks, but it would have been impossible without all of that awesome writing. So I wasn't going to write all that.
That's true. That is true. Let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about Esper Genesis. Esper Genesis is 5th edition science fiction, right?
Correct.
I think is a great way to put it. But so I think when people think that just because of the times we're in and the excitement it had, they think a lot about like Starfinder, right? We're thinking about goblins in space and that sort of thing. But that's not what this is. Talk to me a little bit about the idea behind Esper Genesis and why you wanted to do it and sort of what stories people should be telling with it, or you expect people to tell with it, I guess.
Esper Genesis it's not what is that old 5e sci-fi game, Dragon Star, I think it was something like that with like space dragons and space goblins and it's nothing like that at all. Originally what it was really just a bunch of rules I had put together for sci-fi weapons and armor, and I decided that I wanted to put a rule set together for it. So I started putting some stuff together, and I looked at the D&D books, and a lot of people don't realize it because Dungeons and Dragons has been around so long, but D&D has its own base setting. So
Yes,
it's like when you open up a book, there's elves, there's dwarves, there's goblins. They all interact with each other in a particular way. And I said, well, there are a bunch of sci-fi settings out there, but there's no like base science fiction setting. Everyone wants to borrow the fantasy setting and stick it into sci-fi, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So I said, let me make some alien races. Let me make some planets. Let me make a storyline, and kind of, and the galaxy started putting itself together, and we came out with Esper Genesis. Esper Genesis is about as true to 5th edition as you can get for a sci-fi game. We announced it July of last year. That's when we decided to actually make it into a product, and then. After we announced that, a few months later, we started seeing some games come out, and I think 5th edition gets deconstructed a lot. So does Pathfinder. So do the other. They get deconstructed and rebuilt into these systems, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted a sci-fi game that was fast, it was fun, and that if somebody opened up the player's handbook and read it and knew how to play 5th edition, and they opened up the Esper Genesis book, they'll look at the rules and go, I know how to play this already. And I just need to read the rules for, instead of this, it's now that. Starship rules work the same way as D&D combat. And that's, people love 5e for the way that it functions. It's easy, fast-paced.
I think the advantage for having something that has a sort of 5e core is that I don't need to learn an entirely new rule set. I understand the basics when I sit down to play already, and that is very helpful because not everybody then has the time to go reread another 1,000 pages to learn how to play the game and pick the right monsters from the bestiary and all that kind of stuff. This definitely helps with that. So when we think about Esper Genesis, when we say sci-fi, I don't expect necessarily things like magic to always be in my sci-fi. Do we have magic there?
Not exactly. Okay, so we have what's called Esper powers. So just a brief description of the setting is that it's a spacefaring galaxy. It's actually our galaxy. The Sol system is in it, but this is in the future. There are these almost like small moons. They are artifact machines called crucibles, and each of them generate a particular power source in the core, in its core, that is identified as any particular element. It's an infinite power source that races have been tapping into to power cities and spaceships and things like that over their last few generations. It's been a technology source. However, after a few centuries, people started, or particular people started to attune to the power that comes out of the crucibles. They started to be able to control the power, an infinite power source that can change matter. They started exhibiting abilities, being able to control gravity, control light, shape matter. There are technician classes like the engineer, for example, who they're able to use the power source to instantly create nanobots and weapons and machines.
Oh, cool! That's awesome.
It's not necessarily magic per se. It's not like a spell where you need a component or a ritual or anything like that. It does still use the same or a similar type of system. Depending on who you are, there are melders who are able to pull gravity and light and matter out of the air and shape it on their own. Sometimes at the expense of their own mental health.
Right, sure. Yeah. So what were some of the big challenges with bringing 5th edition into science fiction?
Well, 5th edition is a wonderful rule system. If you open up the DM's guide, it is probably one of the best Dungeon Master's guides, I think, out of all of the editions of D&D, because you can open up the book and you can go in the middle of the book and there's a whole section that goes, here's how to do this. And if you don't really like the way this works, here's how you can, just kind of take it and make it work. And so, I borrowed some stuff out of the Dungeon Master's Guide, not very much, just kind of like a starting point, and then everything was just easy as far as making sci-fi rules. What happened was that I actually put things together and I brought it to Metatopia last year.
Nice.
So
what is Metatopia? Tell the people out there.
Metatopia is a wonderful convention that is run by Double Exposure. Mm-hmm. It's almost the reverse of a regular gaming convention. You bring your game to Metatopia, and the industry people that are there, or the people that come there for the convention, they will sit down and they will test your game and play your game and give you opinions on what they think, whether or not they had fun, ask you questions about it. And there's so much information that you can get that you'd never even think of by going there and just presenting a game, or going there and trying someone else's game. You can have a lot of fun. You can see a lot of new and interesting things that come out of that convention. It's brilliantly thought out. Yeah, if you haven't been to one, I would definitely recommend going to Metatopia. This year it's in November. Actually, in November every year. I brought Esper Genesis there. So I presented it in 2 different games, and one of them I had a couple of industry professionals, Cam Banks, who's awesome, Rob Donahue. They sat down and they played, and I saw a whole bunch of different little bugs and fixes that I didn't really think about. And then Cam turned around and looked at me and said, you know what? I said, this is great. He said, I like what you did by adding in a setting and a story. And he said, you already have rules. D&D already exists. So just go with, everything else. And I looked at it and I said, well, yeah, I have the rules, the sci-fi rules. I kind of had a hang of building everything around it. So I said, okay, let me just go crazy. Let me build a whole galaxy. Let me build planets. Let me build aliens. New types of everything. Let me put together. I had a workshop at Gen Con for an alien design. I had a couple of guys sit there and design aliens that's going to go into the bestiary. So I kind of wanted to go with the vein of how D&D is going, and just have a universe that's expanding around a base set of rules that's fun to use.
That's really, really cool. And it's great that the crowd at Metatopia seemed to like it too. So you knew you had something, and now you've put it out for the world to share. People can get the free Esper Genesis basic rules right now on DriveThruRPG, which I recommend they definitely do to check out the game. What else can they look forward to for Esper Genesis?
Esper Genesis is the basic rules is kind of an introduction. Mm-hmm. We wanted to do a thing kind of like the D&D basic rules. Sure. That but makes perfect sense. We did get a little ahead of ourselves, and Brian and I looked at each other and we were like, hey, let's add some art and some and some everything else to this, and it became this 160 page PDF, and that we printed out some copies for Gen Con. But it is everything that you need to take a look at the game and to start an Esper Genesis campaign. It has 4 basic classes, 5 alien races. It has base rules for everything D&D sci-fi, and it is an introductory to a 3-book set that we're coming out with at the end of the year. Just like the 5th edition D&D books, we're gonna have a core manual. We're going to have a threats database, and we have a master technician's guide. Gives you rules for expanding on shipbuilding and ship combat and things like that.
That's really cool. I can't wait to have ship combat rules. So let me ask you a quick ship combat question. Are those rules finalized at the moment? You're still working out the kinks?
The core of the of the Starship rules is done. We've actually been testing that out for a year. They're actually a lot of fun. You can get a really good feel for it in the basic rules, because it effectively works like it's three-dimensional ground combat, just at a much faster rate. We wanted to make it so that we wanted to make it so that if you know how ground combat works, then you can get into a starship and the rules won't entirely change on you. It's not going to be like you're picking up a whole new game. I don't think that kind of thing is fun personally. So we wanted to keep the spirit of 5th edition as much as possible in the game, and that goes with everything, including spaceships.
So let me ask you a question then. When we talk about spaceship combat, a lot of times when I see ship combat or vehicle combat, it's like, oh man, this thing is only really for one person to do for the next half hour while the rest of us watch. Is that how ship combat is in Esper Genesis? Like, is there one pilot who's doing everything, or does the whole crew get to participate?
Oh no. Actually, crew selection. Well, there are single player ships.
Sure.
There are single player starfighters. Most of the time, if you end up in one, your other party members are probably going to end up in their own. But but the coolest thing about ship combat in Esper Genesis, are the group ships, shuttles and freighters and things like that, and also the larger ships, because crew selection is very important. What happens is that every single party member has a role that can be pilot, co-pilot, gunner, technician, and when combat starts, the group decides the order in which things happen. The pilot makes a maneuver. The pilot can make a maneuver that can affect the aim of the gunner, or can affect the position of the shields, where the technician would have to jump in. The technician can do something that affects something that the pilot can do or the gunner can do. So they sort of have to get together as a team and work it out. And at the same time, the party also becomes part of the ship's stats. Every ship has base stats, and the ship's maneuverability is half based off of the pilot's dexterity. The ship's defenses are half based off of the technician's intelligence score. So those positions, you kind of want to pick who's best at what, and your ship stats will actually be higher than someone else's.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. That's the way to do it, is to get the whole crew involved. So I love that. Oh man, I love that so much. Okay. I think we are going to start wrapping up here, just because I know you've got places you need to go.
I have a hurricane coming.
Yes,
it's not pretty.
Yes, yeah. So, and we would like to get you out of Florida before Sunday. So where can people find you?
I am on Twitter. I am at Skydawn1, but that's the number 1 at the end. I am also... actually, you can find our company website at alligatoralley.entertainment.com. You can visit the Esper Genesis homepage at espergenesis.com. And I can always be found anywhere else on DM's Guild. Send me a message. I love to hear from people. I've had a wonderful experience with all of my playtesters and people that love the game, and it's been a blast, working in this industry and seeing how players can get into stuff. So, if you want to send me a message, ask me a question, feel free. I'm here.
Excellent. And Rich is a super friendly guy who's an amazing designer, amazing cartographer, amazing graphic designer. So it is excellent to have you on the show, and hopefully we will have you back soon.
Thanks, James. I appreciate it. This is great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on. Hey everybody, before we get to Doug's interview, I just wanted to let you know about Monty Cook Games and their ongoing Kickstarter for Numenera. What is Numenera? Well, it's an amazing game designed by the one and only Monty Cook, a legend in the field. It is his baby. It is set 1 billion years in our future. Numenera is a tabletop role-playing game about exploration and discovery. The people of the Ninth World are in a dark age, and they're suffering through isolation and struggle, but discovery awaits those brave enough who can seek out the works of prior worlds. Those who can uncover and master the Numenera can unlock the powers and abilities of the ancients and perhaps bring new light to a struggling world. This Kickstarter is amazing. It is already funded and it's compatible with all of the Numenera products you might already have. Numenera, Discovery, and Destiny are 2 new core rulebooks that will enhance your game. Discovery is a fresh take on the existing core rulebook. It streamlines some things, makes things simpler, and is just all around great. Destiny provides new options and all sorts of new vibrant themes. Check those both out. They're compatible. Use them together. Create some adventure for your friends in Numenera 1 billion years in the future. Visit mymcg.info/DST podcast. That's mymcg.info/DST podcast for more information and to check out this amazing Kickstarter. Okay, everybody, now I am here with Douglas Cole, an amazing game designer who I also call friend. Doug, welcome to Tabletop Babble. Who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Thanks for the introduction, James. Well, my name is Douglas Cole. I run a small company called Gaming Ballistic. It started as a blog and has expanded into the world of actually publishing role-playing games. I have precisely one product currently for sale, which is, as the joke has become, grappling rules for Dungeons and Dragons type games that don't suck. And what that is it takes the native mechanics of D&D type games, roll 1d20 plus a bonus against a target number, and then do damage, and applies that to grappling. I played it a couple times for demonstrations at Gen Con at the 50th anniversary. I've played it in my own games, and it's a really fun way to add grappling to the system in a way that is natural and native. And I've also got a couple other things in the works. With any luck, this podcast will go live the day of my second product launches, which is a Kickstarter in support of Dungeon Grappling. It's an adventure. Doesn't require Dungeon Grappling to play, but it makes use of monsters that will want to grab you in either to rip you apart or eat you or suffocate you or whatever. And that's really the key of it, is to bring a dynamic to combat that is present in life but frequently not present in games, which is most monsters are going to want to grab a hold of you and make you their dinner. And that's a different feel than the typical hit point ablation track that you see.
What's interesting is, and we talked a lot about this last time we spoke, it's an amazing thing that you're doing with grappling, because one of the first times I spoke with you for a Gaming Ballistic thing, you were mentioning to me that you've done grappling rules for other systems like GURPS, which is a very precise system, I would say, and a very technical, right? A very tactical system.
Yes. Funny you should mention that. The game the supplement that I wrote was called Technical Grappling. The word technical comes up a lot when you are being taught how to grapple. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Horengdo, I'm sure that there are many other grappling arts. You talk about the technique and you need to be technical. You don't want to rely on brute force. Although strength is very important, what you're doing with grappling is acting as a lever, as a power multiplier, a force multiplier to your strength in order to manipulate your opponent so that they do what they want. The original Technical Grappling book is what the Dungeon Grappling is based off of. However, I've simplified it, because what the way that it worked is I wrote technical grappling and I tried to be really, really detailed, and that was fine. But there were ways that I could have applied those details that would have been faster at the table. And I refined those in order to write technical grappling for OSR games. Peter Del Orto, a longtime friend and collaborator of mine, and also a Shuto fighter. He actually went to Japan for a year or more and fought amateur MMA for a while, grappling and striking and all that. So, and he is a big proponent of fast, light, don't bother with a table lookup, right? If you can't just play it right there, he's not that interested because he wants to get together with his friends for 8 hours and just game and not spend a lot of time looking at rules. So he has been a great influence on my game design, and we got together to distill technical grappling into a rule system for old school games. And we did it for Swords and Wizardry and published that in Manor number 8 with Tim Shorts. Maybe 1,500 words. It's digest size, so it's probably 4 or 5 pages. But it really did the job. And as I was writing a much larger project called Dragon Heresy, which is 400,000 words, Ken Haidt, you might have heard that name before, he's been editing it for a bit, but he's a busy dude, so it's taken longer. But that system made it into the 5th edition derived rule set. And then as I was wanting to do a Kickstarter, I got advice from Kevin Crawford, as it happened, that to kickstart that game, having no prior experience in Kickstarter, no name, was rolling the dice in a horrible way. He was considerably more blunt than that, which I didn't appreciate. Sort of, right? I mean, it's hard advice to swallow. It's like drinking castor oil. But the fact of the matter is, he's right. Asking for anywhere between $50,000 and $150,000 the first time out, when no one knows if I can run a project, was never going to happen. And he was absolutely correct about that. So we did Dungeon Grappling and distilled it for 5th edition Pathfinder and amplified it a little bit for Swords and Wizardry in a way that is fast and playable. And actually, one of the things that I am about to release at some point in the next few weeks is a 1-page distillation for 5th edition of Dungeon Grappling. We've expanded. There's going to be a 2-page Dungeon Grappling light in the upcoming Kickstarter. Mostly 2 pages because the layout is a little more sparse, and I jammed everything into it so it would fit on one side of a page. But, in any case, it can be done very quickly, and I was able to explain it to 2 different groups of people, ages maybe about 10 to significant adult, although I'm probably one of the oldest people there, if not. But at Gen Con, ran 2 groups through it, and once you explain what's going on and you write down a couple of numbers that are sort of the equivalent of armor class for grappling and kind of a hit point limit sort of for grappling, once you write those down, you just start playing, and then it's as natural to grapple as it is to hit somebody with a sword.
So, and we talked a lot about that the last time you were here, but I'd love to get the quick top-level view. I agree. Grappling in a lot of games, particularly 3.x D&D, Pathfinder, even in 5th edition, seems like unnecessarily complicated. You're always getting the book out to look stuff up, so it's slowing down gameplay. Your version really does speed things up, and it's because, like you said, you looked at, well, what do we do when we swing a sword? We should be doing the same exact thing when we grapple. So could you talk a little bit about how you sort of developed that? I really love Dungeon Grappling. I contributed to the Kickstarter. I have my hardcover copy, or not my hardcover, my softcover copy. I've got my print version, which is pretty incredible. I've got my PDF version. I really love the book. So talk to me a little bit about what you did to make grappling simple and faster at the table.
Ultimately, what I tried to do is I came up over the last couple of years as I was writing about it is with a principle of use what's there. All role-playing games show up at your table with a certain number of native mechanics. And I explored that at length in a series of blog posts. I think there are 14 of them that I did called Violent Resolution, which you can find at gamingballistic.com. But it was really looking at combat systems, Knights Black Agents, which is, of course, Gumshoe derived, 5th edition, Savage Worlds, GURPS, and Fate, I believe. And I was looking at these, and you really want to basically say, okay, what is the native mechanic that you're doing resolution of fighting in? And if you are not forced to move aside from that mechanic, don't. And that's kind of what I tried to do with the various grappling systems. I would, like, for example, like Gumshoe already has that. They don't treat grapples or gunshots terribly differently because of the relatively and deliberately low resolution of the system. They don't care how you're incapacitated, you just are. And that's cool. In Fate, you're either creating an advantage or creating a disadvantage on your foe, or you're making an attack. And an attack might be like a joint, you're breaking his arm with a joint lock. Creating advantage might be, I'm tying him up. So it's kind of there already. GURPS and D&D, oddly enough, don't do that in a way. In D&D, you attack or you roll a contest of strength or something like that. And then if you win, then your opponent gets a condition. And I like conditions. I really do, and I use them extensively in the book. On the other hand, in GURPS, which is a very point-based system, you make an attack, there's a defense, so that's normal. But if you are successful, then your foe gets a grappled condition in a way, and there's a penalty for that. A lot of the conditions come about through the use of saving throws. And so it's one of these things where they're like, we're going to use 2 different bits of our attack mechanic, and there you go, it's grappling. And why do we do that? I think to some extent it's because grappling has become divorced in people's minds from combat, both from an evolution of the mechanics, but also, for whatever reason, it's been perceived of as separable. But if you look at all the fight manuals and history and whatever, they're not. If you're doing something with a sword, if you look at Talhofer or Fiore is a great example because it's all grappling with weapons. But if you look at that stuff, fight manuals and even like samurai movies where you come in with a sword and then you slip in and throw somebody, whatever. Anyway, grappling and fighting with weapons it's just fighting. It's not. Or if you read tales of bare knuckle boxing, like the one that Patrick O'Brien put in one of the first HMS Surprise, the Aubrey Maturin series. There's a Barrett Bondin, who is played by Billy Boyd in the movie, gets into a fight, a deliberate prize fight with a member of another crew, and they're grabbing each other hair and slamming each other into posts and, a headlock and then punch to the face. And so the kind of I'm just going to stand up and there's no clinching, and if you clinch, you separate so you can keep striking. That kind of thing is a relatively modern invention. And so, but in our minds, we treat these things as very differently. And so what I was trying to do is say, one of the reasons I think that nobody grapples is, first of all, it's arcane. And also, it's usually a substandard option relative to hitting someone with a sword because unarmed damage is low. In Swords and Wizardry, I can make a grappling attack on you, and if I roll badly, I come out the worst for it. Whereas if I swing a sword at you, the worst I can do is miss. So there's some perverse incentives there. Anyway, long story less long, what I wanted to do is take something that is perceived as very technical. And by the way, sword fighting is very technical. Unarmed combat is very technical.
Right. Yeah.
Right? I mean,
just watch Princess Bride, right?
Right, exactly. And heck, watch, so you're absolutely right. But in a lot of the modern media, they do pretty well, and Princess Bride is a great example because it is stage fighting. But you see all of this stuff, and you're comfortable saying, "Well, I'm going to abstract all of that as 1d20 plus a bonus against armor class." And my big revelation is, and it's not terribly different. Is let's just do that. And the next piece of thing is to say, well, and frankly, D&D handles this better. D&D and GURPS, actually. They both have the concept, and other games do as well, but those two in particular have a concept of damage type. Burning type, slashing type, piercing type, in GURPS, cut, thrust, impale, whatever. But the concept of damage type, where you roll damage and it has a flavor to it, is incredibly useful. And by taking advantage of that and saying that the damage that you're going to do in a grapple is control or restraint type of damage, that gives you a secondary axis to operate on that is useful from both a narrative and a mechanics point of view. And so by saying, oh, how do I grapple? Roll to hit. Well, how do I calculate it? If you're a fighty type, you're probably rolling the same bonus that you are for an attack, right? Because almost all the fighty types in 5th edition, for example, have an athletics proficiency. And if you are proficient in sword, if you have proficiency with martial weapons, or you are proficient in athletics, then your bonuses, which are both strength bonuses, stack up the same way. And so you're basically rolling, if I roll 1d20 plus 7 to hit with a sword, I'm probably, in most cases, rolling 1d20 plus 7 to hit with a grapple. But the other thing it allows us to do is to use a grapple difficulty class instead of an armor class. Plate armor does not increase your difficulty of being grabbed. And so you can make some tweaks that way where a large, heavily armored creature, which you cannot stick a sword through, you can still grab. Now they're large, so they're going to be harder to take down, but still, encase someone in steel, and actually you see this in the pictures of the day, you see two people bashing each other over the head with a dueling poleaxe, which is sort of a smallish version of a halberd. But you also see the same two knights in full armor. One is throwing the other so that they can land them on the ground and then use a full overhead strike with the same poleaxe, or pick up a dagger and shove it between the armor plates. And you needed to do that because you were literally invulnerable with late 14th, 15th, 16th century head-to-toe armor until firearms came along. There was not much you could do with a slashing or cutting weapon. You needed something on a long pole with a spike on it, or a heavy, unbalanced axe blade, but you definitely weren't getting it through with a sword. And so you would grapple, and when you found somebody like that, you would literally take the point of your dagger and put it under their armpit or into the gorget and slam your other hand down on the rondel, on the ricasso, or not the ricasso, the rondel, the back, the pommel, to drive it in like a frickin' nail set in order to get through the armor. And the voids between where the plate couldn't cover. And even then, high-quality mail was very resistant to that sort of thing. So it wasn't impervious because quality control was not really a thing back then. Anyway, so that's getting a little far afield, but the point is, what I wanted to do was unify the mechanics of grappling so that you didn't have I'm a scientist, so I'm going to geek out for a bit. You didn't have the activation energy where people said, oh God, please, not grappling. But by doing so, by saying, oh, I'm going to roll for damage, you're speaking in a currency that people understand, on a language they understand. I understand points of damage. I understand points of control. And if you say, I've got 12 control points, so I can translate that into 1d12 hit points if I want to, or I've built up 48 control points, and so whereas it might take me some time to hack at somebody through armor, but if I can quickly build up 48 control points, I can say I'm going to turn that into 4d12 of hit points of damage, and crack! Oh, they're dead. There goes their neck, right? And so because you're talking about the currency of hit points and control points and damage type, you get a delayed gratification effect, but it's all native. People get it. And they get it very, very quickly. And so by speaking the language of the games as in their fundamental expression and not being afraid to simplify things into the high-level concepts the same way that people do with swords and unarmed combat, it made it more native to think of grappling and striking as one and the same. And just as a personal anecdote, for the last, I don't know, I think I started last February, I've been taking these Western martial arts classes in Viking-style combat. And without getting into too much of a diversion there, the shield is the primary weapon there. You're manipulating the other person's shield and body. You're pinning their shield or weapon. You've got this 3-foot circle that you use to block out lines of attack. All of that is best simulated with a grapple, not with strike.
Sure.
But if you look at a shield in many games, it's mostly used as a defense bonus. Oh, yeah, here's a desultory 1d4 or 1d6 if you take a special feat. But that's not how I'm learning it. I'm learning it as your shield is your primary weapon. It's always forward. You're using that to open up the guy for the one strike that kills him with your sword or your spear or your axe. And it doesn't really matter so much what's in that weapon hand, because most of what you're doing is manipulating with the shield so that you can bring the weapon to bear. Now, does that mean that your sword is just kind of hanging out doing nothing? Absolutely not. It's very active, very shield and sword at the same time, but make no mistake, it's the shield that's primary. And saying, oh, I'm going to do a shield manipulation, I'm going to attack you to grapple with my shield, and if I'm successful enough, I can put you on, give you disadvantage, or I can give myself advantage because I have cut off your lines of attack and I've opened you up. Well, from a 5th edition perspective, and I'm going to mostly speak, if you don't mind, in 5th edition terms, because I think it's most pertinent.
Yeah, absolutely.
But from a 5th edition perspective, if you have someone's sword blocked off and you're pinning their shield, or you've opened up their shield and denied them the benefit of that armor class, the best way to talk about all of that is to say they have disadvantage when they're attacking you, and you have advantage when you're attacking them. Effectively, they are restrained. Now, if you wanted to get really picky, you could say, well, but they can still move. Well, yeah, that's true. Right? And they can move, and restrained is really about being tied up in 5th edition. But it would not be a stretch to waive that requirement of, yes, you can still back up, you can still try and disengage, but to say, just like you're retreating from being engaged, if you're doing that in combat, then that provokes an opportunity attack. So the native mechanics of 5th edition come to bear at that point, as long as you apply the conditions properly. And that's kind of what I saw, is that I find 5th edition a robust and flexible engine, not just for hit point versus hit point ablation, but it enables a lot of more intricate stuff. But it doesn't, I guess what I'd say, it's a more intricate narrative outcome without involving more mechanical complexity, or significantly more mechanical complexity. So just like grappling is used to magnify your own strength, the native flexibility and power of the 5th edition engine is used to magnify the storytelling and the cool outcomes that you can get with a very small adaptation in the rules. As an example, in the adventure that I ran for Gen Con, it was sort of a one-shot, right? So it had a very limited set of options in a convention setting because I needed to play through it in 2 hours. But I've expanded it into something that you could probably play through in a couple of sessions. And, the first group made it all the way through to the end, and there was this big ol' bad guy that I'm not going to reveal because it's a surprise. But anyway, it would have taken them a long time to hit point it to death. But they realized very quickly that if they all maybe dogpiled it and got some good rolls, which they did, they wound up incapacitating it and could basically finish it off at leisure because they could strike it without it striking back. So through a combination of magic and brute force, they subdued this creature that would have otherwise been very, very, very dangerous by acting all at once in a way that would not necessarily have been obvious to just people swinging swords and throwing magic missiles. So it was an outcome that was really fun and very decisive.
That's great, and that is an awesome overall explanation of what there is to love about this system of grappling. I love anything that makes gameplay faster, easier, but also gives you more options. It's a lot of times when we get more options, or we try to simulate more things, we get more complicated, and this gives you more options and simplifies at the same time, which is great. Yeah. So we're going to start talking about your next Kickstarter, but one thing I really want to frame this discussion in is, what are some lessons you learned about Kickstarter your first time doing it? So, we had this conversation last time. You'd said, you have this bigger project, Dragon Heresy, that you eventually want to get off the ground, which is also very cool, by the way. And so you had been given some advice that was, hey, maybe don't ask for this much money your first time out. Don't do something as big. Start a little smaller. I've heard other people get that same advice. I've gotten that same advice. I haven't even run a Kickstarter. So what do you think you learned your first time out about Kickstarters, and sort of where are we seeing the changes with this Kickstarter? And, we can talk a little bit about the adventure and that kind of thing as we're doing it.
Sure. All of us who are in the role-playing game, both manufacturer, so to speak, as well as consumers, had better be aware of Kickstarter. It is a fantastic way to help products come to life. Steve Jackson Games has been running Kickstarters, and they could self-fund, but they're not because, the role-playing game market relative to the board game market is weak. That's not news. The RPG market is 30, 40, $45 million, and the tabletop gaming market in general is in the billions. Steve Jackson, when I interviewed him, says, hey, if an asteroid falls on Hasbro/Wizards of the Coast, please don't let it fall on Magic the Gathering, because that's what keeps the retail stores open. So there is something to be said there. But the thing about Kickstarter, right? Kickstarter is somewhere between a pre-order and venture capital for small folks, and it's a way of raising money for a project. Great. The biggest thing that I learned going into Dungeon Grappling was pay attention to what people complain about in Kickstarters that don't fail. And you know what they complain about most is being late. Being late or not getting it. And the biggest thing that I have found, and what I do for my Kickstarters, is, and this is not unique to me. All right, this is just, you asked me what I learned, and so I'm going to speak as if it's just me in the market, and that's obviously not true. And I don't want to hold myself out as the man for this sort of thing, because there are people like Kevin and like other, and Steve Jackson Games, for example, who routinely will make low six-figure Kickstarters and do very well. So, but for the small fry, for me, the first thing that you really want to do, I think, in doing the Kickstarter is have it as done as you can physically have it before you launch. That's the biggest lesson that I learned from that, is that, and I can tell you that both Dungeon Grappling and Lost Hall of Tyr, which is the title of the upcoming Kickstarter, with a subtitle of Dome Stolen, which means Hall of Judgment in Icelandic, because it is set in the Dragon Heresy universe, because I wrote it all, so I might as well borrow it. It's done. It's ready. I wrote it. I ran it. I play-tested it at Gen Con. I expanded it. I put it in a format that was exportable into InDesign, heavily using Word styles template. It is in layout. If we were a video, I would show you some screen caps that my layout guy, Todd Crapper from Broken Ruler Games, he's doing some amazing stuff with it. I've got preliminary art, from the artists that I've hired to do that. I've got maps coming in from Bogey Maps. So I have invested a good deal of my own money in this ahead of time. But the most important thing, even if I didn't do that, because in Dungeon Grappling I didn't. In Dungeon Grappling I didn't. I waited completely for art. Now, I didn't wait for layout. And that's a strategy that I think, I don't know if other people do it than me. I'm sure that they do. A lot of people will do, they'll commission the art, and then they come through and they give finished art and the manuscript to a layout guy who puts it all together, and boom, done. I do layout first so that I can give the actual pages that will be illustrated to the artists. This is the page that you are going to be drawing on. Fill that box. And that's a little different, I think, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I mean there are a couple of ways to do it. That's the way that I've chosen to do it. I like to see it. And I think that the buying public looks at something that is laid out and says, oh, so that's what I'm buying. Yes, I want that. I want just that. And in fact, interestingly enough, for Dungeon Grappling, some of the reviews that I got said, I like this, but I think it needs a quick reference. And I said, you know what? You're right. So I made one and added a quick reference for all the different rules in the back. It was 2 or 3 pages long. I can't remember. But it made the book better. And by handing out the layout and the final form, that wasn't just a Word file, basically, it gave people an opportunity to drink in the product in a way that otherwise they wouldn't, and they felt invested enough in it to tell me how to make it better in ways that were really better, and so that was great. But basically, the big lesson that I learned in going into Kickstarter is just from reading is don't be late. Don't be late, don't be late, don't be late. If you are late, then you're losing people. You have to be really good to have people come to you and say, well, yes, this person runs projects and they're always late, but they're worth it by the time they come out. That's usually not what you read online. And so all of my project management efforts are bent at on-time delivery.
So let me ask you a question, though, but like some people use Kickstarter because, like you said, Steve Jackson Games, people like maybe Kobold Press, right, might have the money to make the product they want to make, but it turns pre-ordering into an event, and therefore you sell more copies if you go through Kickstarter this day and age. What if you don't have the money to get the art or the layout done, and that's why you're going to Kickstarter? How much of the work do you think you can get done before then?
Do everything that you can without writing. So at the very least, the manuscript had better be finished. Unless you're paying someone else to write your game, unless you go like, oh, I have this great idea, and I want Ken Hite or James Introcaso or Eric Tenkar to write me a game, and I want you to fund me to have them write me a game. That sounds like a very high-risk proposition to me. Not because James or Ken or Eric or Doug can't do it, but that's really, I want you to buy into an idea that I don't know if could even be pulled off or anything. But my biggest thing is, let me bring out my spreadsheet, because I wrote down everything that I needed to do for the game. So writing, editing, indexing, exterior images, interior images, layout, graphic design and or character sheet, maps, art direction, project management, print, and ship. So I broke down Dungeon Grappling and some of my other projects that I'm working on into those bits. Thus far, I haven't necessarily found a bit that doesn't fall into those buckets well. So I think that's a reasonably good breakdown. But certainly, I can write it. I can get a bunch of friends together to play test it. I can understand what I need in terms of art and cover and that kind of thing. But at least if the manuscript is done and the play testing is done, you could talk about that and how it runs and how it feels. And then it's a matter of executing on building the game. It's not a matter of creating what doesn't exist. Writer's block is a real thing. Family tragedies and upsets are a real thing. Getting a new job. It doesn't even have to be a bad thing. I got a new job that's paying me high 6 figures to sell medical devices to people who need them. Awesome. Great. Unfortunately, it's 18 hours a day for the next 6 months because it's well compensated, but it is also very demanding. And so, my writing time has just gone to 0. So that would be a fantastic, wonderful opportunity for a person. But nonetheless, it would basically say, now that I have your money, I can't work on your game. And that's not cool. It's not cool ever. It's really not cool in Kickstarter because the leap of faith is greater. And so from that perspective, at least have the darn thing written. That's on you, right? That's on you. And then have a plan. Have a business plan. How are you going to do this? What I wound up doing is I reach out to all of the artists that I'd like to work on the book. I sent 36 emails to people that I met at Gen Con. They're amazing artists. They're out of my league mostly. Because if you're at Gen Con making a living selling prints on your art and can afford the non-trivial expenses of having a booth, you're good at what you do, and the market has recognized that. And so while I hope to aspire to hire those people one day, I can't do it yet. Nonetheless, I've got another dozen or two artists in my digital Rolodex, some of whom are that expensive, some of whom aren't, but should be. Because they're that good, but their name isn't out there as much as it will be eventually. And so right now they're trying to build a brand, and they're using me to do that, and I'm using them to do. I mean, it's a mutual win, right? And so I reach out to those guys and say, "Are you interested in working on this project?" And they say, "Tell me more." And I say, "Here's the right situation. Here's the contract you would sign. Here's roughly when it would happen. Here's the kind of thing that it wants to be." And sometimes they say, as one did, I know what you're asking me to do, and I'm interested, but don't ask me to do it until you can offer me 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces at once. I'm not going to onesie-twosie this. I'm like, that's totally cool. Some people will say, yes, I'm very eager to work on this, and a couple of my artists from Dungeon Grappling are in on the new project. And one of them was like, "Oh, I can't wait," and the other was like, "Yeah, not only can I not wait, I think I've gotten better at this." And I looked at his style, and I'm like, "Wow, you really have gotten better at this. Here, have my cover." So it was having as many, and then reach out to your editor. By the way, you have an editor, right? You're not that good. I don't care who you are. You're not that good a writer that you don't need an editor. And that was a piece of advice that I got from somebody else, totally. and it's just true.
And you are so close to your own writing and your own project. Having an editor and play testing your stuff, and even if you can get other people to play test your stuff, really makes a big, big difference. I couldn't agree more. They're going to catch things that you will not catch. Right. And it's not just, an editor is more than fixing your typos. An editor is a collaborator who helps you bring the product to life.
That is absolutely true. And what happened to me in this particular case was interesting because Dungeon Grappling was not heavily edited. Maybe it should have been, but it was not heavily edited. I had a lot of help, amateur help, so to speak. But then when I gave Dragon Heresy to Ken, we sat down for 100 minutes. I blogged about that. But we sat down for 100 minutes and we talked. And he gave me some really, really good advice, some of which was incredibly simple, right? Avoid the use of the passive voice. Don't be a moral coward. Don't have conditional statements, right? The dragon might do this. The players might. You should. No, this is what happens, right? Be direct and definitive. And then avoid the use of to be. The phrase that he used was called go goodwill hunting. If something happens, the dragon will attack. No, if something happens, the dragon attacks. Right? It's just a bit of punchiness in the language. Anyway, so I like to think of myself, as we all do, as a good writer. I've had some decent feedback that at least it's not terrible. When I give my manuscripts to Pyramid Magazine, they don't come back heavily carved up. But what I wound up doing for the manuscript, the Lost Hall manuscript, is I applied those rules that Ken gave me to that heavily, and I just revised and revised and revised based on those 3 rules. And when I gave it to John Adamus, who's a Emmy award-winning editor that has done some really major work, which, by the way, let me tell you, if you can hire John, and you probably can, do so. Because he would be replying to emails almost before I sent them. He's the most responsive guy that I've ever had the pleasure to work with in the role-playing game industry. I just cannot say enough about his turnaround time, the quality of his work, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, free plug for John, but he deserves it. Anyway, so when I gave it to John, he basically came back and he said, yeah, here are the comments, but it was a pretty light edit, largely because there are basic rules that you use to write for adventure gaming that don't work when you're writing a corporate memo, right? If you're doing business collaboration, you really want to make sure that people are not offended by what you have to say because an email is forever, right? You're trying to get people to help you, to work with you, to step up and do whatever. Adventure writing is not that. And that's the other thing, is that, you know, the style of writing that you do for personal communications and casual communications is not exciting technical writing. And exciting is because it's a game, and technical writing is because you're conveying information that you need to land on the person's brain in a certain way. And role-playing game writing has more in common with technical writing than it does with fiction writing. Because you're explaining rules, you're explaining options, you're explaining a lot of stuff. It needs to be pithy. You can't wander around because you need to get to the point where you're playing the game, right? The words on your page in Dungeon Grappling or Dragon Heresy or Domstall Lost Hall of Tyr are facilitators to the actual fun. Fiction is the actual fun. When I read Tarzan, that's the fun. I'm not going to go play Tarzan, I'm reading Tarzan. So that's where the evocativeness happens. Role-playing game writing is providing somebody else tools to have fun their way, and that's a different kind of writing. It's more like an instruction manual than it is a fiction story. That doesn't mean there's not room for evocative language. That doesn't mean it's dry or boring. Dry or boring role-playing game writing is every bit as dry or boring as reading a user manual, and that's not how it's supposed to for a computer, and that's not how it's supposed to be. But it's different, and you need to recognize that. And I've gone a little far afield, but really coming back to it, everything that you can physically do on your own, do. Anything that you can physically afford to do on your own, do. If you can't afford, don't. But recognize that coming to the table, like for Lost, even for Dungeon Grappling, I said, here's the cheesy cover that I bought with a template for $20 on RPG Now or whatever it was, and I put Dungeon Grappling on it, and I grabbed a public domain image of a fight book with two people throwing each other, and I said, that's going to be the cover unless we hit the stretch goal. So people knew what they were going to expect. I said, well, I've already paid for layout because that's how I want to do art direction, so that I can say, this image needs to be here surrounded by these words, and these words are telling a story about magical spells used to grapple. And so I want an art that has someone casting a magical spell that is being used to grapple. But by seeing the layout, people are like, oh, I see what that looks like. That's cool. And that's helpful, right? But if nothing else, have a pile of paper on your desk that says, the manuscript of my game, and you say, this is it, and it's done. The farther along you go in the process, the less risk there is. And the more I think people are going to be willing to shell out. Now, if you're already a world-famous game designer and can command six-figure Kickstarters because of your name, Monty Cook and Kevin Crawford come to mind, then great. You could say, I have an idea, and people will say, your idea is worth supporting because I've got 12 games from you on my shelf, and they're awesome. So whatever you do is going to be worthwhile. For people like me, who are just starting out, requires more work because you need to prove to people how good you are. But once you get their money, it becomes a project management exercise, and that's where the next piece of Kickstarter comes into play, which is, I think, the project management side. I've been doing project and people management professionally for, a decade or so as part of my day job, but it's not always a skill that is going to come naturally. I think everyone can do it. If you can manage your life, you can manage a project. But you really need to sit down with a spreadsheet and a plan and write down all the pieces that need to go into your game. And the best way to do that is to take a great game, whether it's Adventurer, Conqueror, King, or Simba Room, or 5th edition, or Knights Black Agents, or GURPS, or whatever, and page through it. And you start, here's a book on my desk. Oh, it has a cover. It has a custom font on that cover. It has art on that cover. It has logos. It has an international standard book number, which, by the way, if you buy them one at a time, are hugely expensive. Oh, and that barcode, don't buy it from Boker, because you can just go to a free online thing and just generate it. That was I made that mistake once.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but it's the kind of thing. It's like there's some really great resources out there that and then drop a couple of bucks in their kitty, because they're saving you hundreds of dollars in fees because Boker effectively has a monopoly on the generation of ISBNs here in the U.S. at least. And so you don't necessarily need an ISBN in order to self-publish. That's the first thing. You need an ISBN to list on certain places, and certain sales require one. And if you have one, sometimes you can go through someone who, you can be, you can have one of my ISBNs and I'll charge you $10 for it because they've bought 1,000 and that has a big discount. The problem with that, it's a good strategy. The problem with it is that if I'm coming in as Gaming Ballistic and I buy one of these shared ISBNs from someone, they are listed as the publisher of record. So that means it's not published by Gaming Ballistic. Even though my name will be on it, when someone looks it up, it'll be James Introcaso Publishing or something. It'll be somebody else. And if that matters to you, how you are found online or where that search goes, then you're going to have to shell out for more. If it doesn't matter to you, then booyah, great. So that was something that there's a pro and a con to that that I got to learn about. But just looking at the cover, I'll pull out my Dungeons. This is the new one from Pub Graphics, my new favorite print-on-demand company. So I'm looking at my own book, right? I've got a title font that was designed by Michael, and I've got a cover image that was painted by Michael. I've got a logo for my company that was done for me by Daniel Lunsford. On the back, I've got the ISBN. I had to do that. And a couple other logos that say what games they're for. And by the way, you can't just slap the D&D logo on a product unless you're part of the GM's Guild. And if you do, you are getting asked to be visited by the evil lawyers of Doom +5. And they are highly resistant to normal damage. Right? So you're going to need to be able to communicate what your product is about on that cover, because that's what people are going to look at, right? They're going to take my book and flip it over and say, oh, here's a 5e. Well, I know what that means, and it's not Wizard's trade dress, and so it's legal. Now, I have a Swords and Wizardry compatible logo on there and a Pathfinder logo on there as well, and those have licensing agreements, both of which are free. The Pathfinder one, you have to fill out a form, but it's very simple, and you can do it. And hey, look, now my book has a Pathfinder logo on it, and it's cool. But that's the kind of thing that you can and should find out and do long before you launch your Kickstarter, because you can, and it's free. But it's the due diligence that you need to do. You open the book and you see a title page. Now I jump right to it. Some people have some blank pages. Some people have some art. But you're going to look at credits and look at the credits. Look at other games' credits page and see what it is that they felt was important enough to put on that page. That's your to-do list. Let me grab the player's handbook, right? So I'm going to open it up. I see a blank page. I see a great-looking splash page, and now I see credits, right? Lead designer, player's handbook lead, rules development, writing, editing, producer. So there's your project management, art directors, and I don't doubt it, given the amount of graphic design, cover illustration, interior illustration. Contributions, project management, more different project management, production services, which is probably sourcing of the print, brand and marketing, right? That's something that you have to think about. I'm not great at it, which is, I'm trying to be better at it, which is why I'm talking to you, right? Social media matters, getting out there matters, getting your book out there matters, and then playtesting and consultation fees. But if you look at the various games and books, you will see the list of things that people who are doing well enough to make beautiful, hardcover, multiple thousands of copies per print run books successfully, what is it that they did enough of to put it in the credits page as worthy of note? And if you have not studied that, you are not doing your job as a producer of books.
So speaking of doing your job as a producer of books, let's talk a little bit about your Kickstarter and the product people are actually going to get. So this is an adventure. It is. Talk to me about how long it is, what level it's made for, and sort of the overall story without getting too spoilery.
No, absolutely. So it was designed around. So I'll answer the exact question. It's designed around 4 to 6 level 4 characters, which what I wanted to do was tailor it to a 5th edition game after you got to choose your archetype, but before level 7 when all the really cool stuff happens, right? Because it's kind of like level 1 and 2, yeah, you call yourself a fighter, but you're not a champion, you're not a battle master, you're not an arcane whatever, mystic knight. You're not any of that until you get to 3rd level, right? So that's where some of the cool specialization happens. At 6th, 7th, 8th level and higher, not only are you into your next proficiency bonus, you are starting to get some game-altering powers. And since the point of the adventure was to really introduce the grappling concepts to people, I wanted them to experience it as an enhancement to their ways of doing business or to have their business interfered with without having a gigantic character sheet. And so it's kind of somewhat self-serving in that the adventure was really designed for people for whom their character sheets could easily fit on one page without so many options that they're like, well, why would I grapple when I can just invoke Thor's hammer of doom and crush everybody in the playfield, right? I didn't want that to dominate the adventure. And so that's where it's sort of, I would say it's really going to play best in level 3 to 6 range. It's set in the world of Dragon Heresy, which means it's heavily Norse inspired. And the overall piece is that it's a journey. It's literally a quest. A prior adventuring group was hunting down some goblins and hobgoblins that had been raiding through an area in the northwest of the realm of Torrengar, which is my Norse-inspired Viking-ish culture that is the core of the Dragon Heresy bit. And they're chasing down these hobgoblins, and they come across a comely young lass who has been harried by the hobgoblins, and she tells a story of abuse and bear escape, and one of the fighters in this group is smitten with her, and yes, we're going to help you and save you and all that stuff. And she tells some stories about how these hobgoblins and goblins, which in my world, those are all fairies. They're fae. And so the goblins and hobgoblins are fae creatures, but they were looking for something, and the paladin in this adventure group says, my goodness gracious, you're describing the Lost Hall of Tyr, Domstallen. And for whatever reason, this poor, beautiful lady knows where the key to the fortress is, so to speak. And it's not really a key, it's a token that allows you to see through a glamour, an illusion that Tyr himself placed over the place. And in this hall are writings and studies about law and judgment. And that's really the MacGuffin, right? Because remember, this is a convention scenario, so you needed something that would be worth chasing after. And in this particular, but it can't be so worth chasing after that once you find it, you're like, well, now that I have the +5 Sword of Awesome, I think I'll keep that for myself. And so it was something that inspired the local priesthood, the clerics of Tyr, to say, we don't have the manpower to go get this because, by the way, the adventurers who got killed finding this thing. Anyway, so they go off and they find out that in fact this comely young lass is actually like an archfey. She's super powerful, and she couldn't break the enchantment to find this key, but the players could, and they got hoodwinked. The fighter was under a glamour, and things happen, and almost everybody is wiped out. The paladin gets taken off to a shadow dimension, having defeated the archfey in a battle of wits, and the tokens are able to be brought back to Isfjall, the town, and the player characters now are sponsored by the clergy, the priesthood of Tyr, the clerics of Tyr, to venture off and find the Lost Hall, and to figure out what's going on. And so that's kind of where play starts. You start with a mission. You start with a journey. There are choices that you can make, and eventually you try and find the Lost Hall. Some of the challenges, the challenges are not all grappling challenges. They're deliberately stuff that, because I built it as dungeon grappling support. And so, but some of the challenges are deliberately not grappling stuff. Some of it you have to fight, and some of the challenges are physical challenges, right? Climbing a cliff can be done with technical grappling. I had a guy on the internet said, "Oh, this is how I would do this," and you can say, "Oh, well, gravity is pulling you down, and gravity is pulling you down, and you are fighting against it." And I had a system that I'd worked out that was really quite cool. But when I worked out all the pieces, it was very clear that when I got to the table at Gen Con, I looked up and at the 7 people looking at me and realized each of them was going to have to make 6 or 7 dice rolls each to have them climb up the tower. And I'm like, oh, goodness gracious, that's just not how that's going to happen. Because it became a little mini game in a way, which was cool and all, but that wasn't why they were there. So I hand waved it a little bit and then came up with a better system that night and played the next time. And as a matter of fact, we never really got to it, but in the demo. But the point is that there was a way of resolving with control points and some of the mechanics a way that makes climbing a little bit more interesting. And drowning you can resolve as a grapple. That one's actually pretty cool. But that's the kind of thing is like, you're drowning or you're whatever, or the water, you have to keep yourself afloat. And so you make an athletics roll and you roll your control damage, and every round the water attacks you successfully, or you have to make a saving throw based on your athletics. And if you fail, you get pulled under a little bit. And if you get pulled under too much, you start to drown, right? So there are ways of using the grappling concept to represent things other than just wrestling. And that was kind of fun as well. But there's a bunch of challenges. There's monsters that grapple, and there's wilderness travel and stuff like that. And anyway, it's right now the book is shaping up to be north of 50 pages, maybe between 50 and 55. The layout is freaking gorgeous. So it's basically an intro game. It's going to have a couple pages of dungeon grappling quick start that has the basic rules in the back. Managed to condense all the core stuff down to about 2 pages of reasonably readable text. And that's kind of where we are. I hope that it's going to go live on my birthday, October 2nd. And it's written, it's edited. Layout is underway and will probably be done very shortly, long before the Kickstarter is done. It may even be done today, my real time. I've commissioned the cover. That's something I didn't do in Dungeon Grappling until the end, but the cover is your forward face of the book. It sets the tone for it, so I was willing to shell that money out. In order to attract the kind of artists that I want, I gave each of them who would take it a half-page piece that serves as the lead-in for one of the 4 or 5 chapters in the book. Preface, introduction, the actual adventure, a small subsection mostly taken out of Dragon Heresy on wilderness travel, making it a little bit more interesting, and then finally the grappling quick start. Oh, I'm sorry, the bestiary. There is every monster that you face in the adventure, including we came across an elk and we're going to kill it so that we can eat. All of those creatures have a bestiary entry in the back of the book, so you don't have to go to a different book to do it. And the Kickstarter is really, let's get this done in a way that is looking good and fill it with art. And I think I'm going to need about $3,000 or $3,500, which isn't much, right? I mean that's less than I needed for Dungeon Grappling, but about that much, about $3,000 or so to get the basic book, which is going to have. I've already commissioned the maps; those are starting to come in. That's going to be fun too, because I've got Dan Roy of Bogey Maps doing it, and so they're beautiful maps for one thing, full color painted, but they're also going to have a separate file that you'll be able to pull into a virtual tabletop. So not only are they printable, there's a separate JPEG file that you'll be able to download probably from my website if you want to just drag the encounter into Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or whatever. So I like playing online. It's really cool. And to be able to, I think, drag the maps in at full resolution, because they're going to be reduced to 8.5 by 11 at 300 or 350 DPI for the image, so they're full-page maps. But the way that Dan renders them is 30 inches by 40 inches, right? You could print this out on a board on the table if you wanted to, at the scale that he does it. So they're big, good maps that you can move full-size tokens around and put them in Roll20. So that's going to be part of it as well. and up to about just shy of $8,000 is just art, more art, more art. And then if we go crazy and people get into the $10,000 and $12,000 range, I will do an offset print run with 105-pound paper and heavy cover stock. And then if we get into the really high range in 12,000, 15,000, I will do that same thing on offset print run on the deluxe edition of Dungeon Grappling. And the way that this is structured, the rewards are structured, is kind of a rising tide, right? So if you back and you are in on the print-on-demand version, then originally it'll be a print-on-demand coupon until you get to a certain level, and then it'll be, I source it through Pub Graphics, which is a lower cost but higher quality kind of thing, but it means that I have to buy it myself, right? So it's several $1,000s up front for acquisition and fulfillment. And so that's that. To speak to your earlier point, that's money I just can't write a check for. Same thing with an offset print run, $2,000-$3,000 to get the books made all at once. Interestingly enough, though, when you get into the 500, 750, 1,000, it very rapidly becomes price competitive with, especially Drive-Thru RPG, certainly with Lulu, to get a much nicer book done that way, a true offset run, which is basically printing presses and signatures, and you cut out the signatures, and at the high end you sew them together and then glue those in there. But it's just a better binding process than most print on demand. Anyway, long story less long is that's kind of where it stops. After $15,000, if everyone on Eric Tenkar's blog list, all 10,000 people come in and say, yes, I want this, and here's $6 or $7 to a pledge, or $20 or whatever it's going to be for a print copy, and yeah, I want a great copy of Dungeon Grappling as well, so I raise $100,000 on this thing. Well, thanks. Great, awesome, but I can only commit to $15,000 worth of things that I can see myself controlling, and beyond that, it's not done, it's not ready, I don't have it, so I'm not going to promise it. There's not going to be funky dice, there's not going to be sweatshirts, there's not going to be ball caps, because those are things that go horribly out of control and take a otherwise good project and turn it into crap. So I have the visibility on about $15,000 worth of what I want to do, and after that, if it does better than that, well, first of all, God bless, but if it does better than that, then that's just an indication that I'm heading the right direction. And what winds up happening if it goes crazy like that is I get to start spending on the two projects that are pending. Venture Beyond, a science fiction role-playing game that David Pulver is writing with me and for me. And then, of course, the big one, Dragon Heresy. So, I mean, if things went crazy and everyone decided that everyone wants to go about and buy Lost Hall of Tyr, and, it, for some godforsaken reason, the $6 adventure sold, 12,000 copies, and so I'm looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, I would simply not do the Dragon Heresy Kickstarter. I would just fund it. Cool. And get it all done because I can, right? And that's kind of right. I'm doing the Kickstarters both to gauge interest and to raise money, but eventually, if I get enough, revenue flow that I don't have to, then I'd much rather take the risk of doing more with that. But yeah, so that's kind of where it is. And that's a flood of words and stuff. But basically, it's an introductory adventure for characters who have been around a little bit, but not crazy talk. Level 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a quest. It's a journey. You get to experience some overland stuff. There's some neat encounters in it. A lot of creatures that are going to behave a little differently because of the grappling and the tactics. And I hope that people like it.
That is excellent, man. Well, this is a really, really exciting project. Awesome that it's launching on your birthday. So happy birthday, preemptively, here when we're recording. Everybody be sure to find Doug online and wish him a happy birthday. Doug, where are the best places for people to find you online?
So gamingballistic.com is my blog and my company front. And that is where you can see what I'm doing and look at updates and stuff like that. I am also very frequently on a couple of Discord channels for live chat. I'm at 10 Cars Tavern a bunch. The Frog God Games guys have a nice welcome site. I'm very frequently on the GURPS Discord as well. And you can find me frequently on the Steve Jackson Games forums. But if you're looking to talk to me directly, either the 10 Cars Tavern or the GURPS Discord in the non-GURPS area are great places to interact with me. As with many people in this day and age, I am very frequently online, and I'm always happy to chat about stuff. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter at GMING Ballistic, because I couldn't get the Twitter handle cut me off. I couldn't spell it gaming ballistic. It had to be GMing ballistic because my handle wasn't allowed to be that long for whatever reason. But yeah, that's kind of where I am.
Well, people should definitely check it out. A great birthday treat for Doug would be to go contribute to his Kickstarter, and it would be a great treat for yourself because it is going to be an amazing product. So I have the privilege on being on the inside, a little bit of some of these conversations, but also as an owner of Dungeon Grappling, I can tell you that this is going to be something really special and awesome. Doug, thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy coming on and talking to you.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Hey, everybody. That was an awesome interview with two amazing game designers. And you know what? Tabletop Babble is still a new show, but you can help us grow. How can you do that? Well, log on to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. I'll read it out loud here on the show. You can make me say anything you want. Today's review comes from Lady Callie. It is entitled, Love It. Lady Callie says, a fantastic source of amusement and news. Boom. That's it. That's the whole review. Short and sweet. Lady Callie, thank you so much. People, come leave us a review. Help other people find the show. Even if you don't have an iTunes account, go create one. It's totally free, and you can help us out and all of your other favorite podcasts. It only takes like 30 seconds. Thank you so much for your love, for your reviews, and for checking me out over at twitter.com/James Introcaso and at worldbuilderblog.me. Don't Split the Podcast Network is amazing, and there's other shows on here that you might love. I am going to tell you right now that you should totally check out Dames and Dragons. It is an amazing actual play podcast with a bunch of awesome friends pulling silly goofs and telling great stories. So definitely check out Dames and Dragons. If you like to laugh, if you like adventure, you will love Dames and Dragons. Don't Split the Podcast Network is amazing. Thank you to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget that RPGs are like sex. You can still do it with your clothes on. Hey everybody, I just wanted to remind you about Monty Cook Games. They are an amazing sponsor for DSPN this month, and Monty Cook Games has an amazing Kickstarter that you should check out at mymcg.info/DST podcast. That's mymcg.info/DST podcast. And you already heard about Numenera in our mid-roll break for the show, and I just wanted to reiterate, it is an amazing world. The Cypher system is so fun and so easy to use, and it's so focused on storytelling that if you have not checked out Numenera, you are going to want to do so. This is the perfect time to jump on. You'll get a fresh new core rulebook, plus options that you can use, plus the Kickstarter's already funded and they're just busting through stretch goal after stretch goal. So check it all out. Numenera is really, really amazing. You are going to tell some great stories with your friends. So go ahead, take it from me, Monty Cook Games, mymcg.info/DST podcast.